It's an unusually warm Friday morning in South Phoenix, and the halls here at Valley View Leadership Academy are buzzing with some extra excitement. Students and staff have been busy making and doing a few last-minute touches on welcome signs around campus. This doesn't happen often. The governor is coming for a visit.
Thank you. Good. How are you? Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah.
It's just after 8:30 and Governor Katie Hobbs is right on time.
We are number one.
That was amazing.
The governor is used to getting a big welcome, but her two sisters, who are teachers in the Valley, this kind of a welcome is out of the ordinary.
I should have asked you what watch band you were wearing.
Oh my God.
You have matching watch bands?
We do.
You do.
Did you guys plan that?
No.
For the first time ever, Governor Katie Hobbs and her two sisters are sitting down together for a candid conversation about their life and education in Arizona. I guess growing up, who was like the instigator? Who was the fun one?
So we were, wait, what was that?
You were the instigator.
Oh, that is
but
not
also-
true. That is not true. That is not true. So we're 12 years apart, and so it was kind of like we weren't the fun ones when we were growing up.
I thought you were fun.
Oh, okay.
You guys would take me to the mall and crimp my hair. That was fun.
All right.
For
But
me,
we
at
also
least.
were like babysitters a lot, so.
Becky is the governor's twin. The governor is 11 minutes older. The youngest is Beth. And just like sisters do, the three joke and poke fun. They've got a lot of stories and memories they can tell you about growing up in Tempe. Life sometimes got difficult. They grew up in a working class family. At times, the money was so tight, the family would rely on food stamps.
We weren't in a political family at all.
No.
So, yeah, like I remember going to the voting booth with my parents, but we didn't talk politics outside of that at all.
Church, though, was a big part of their life. So what was life like? I mean, you have two educators, a social worker. So what was that growing up like in your home that there was, I guess you got the message of service, really.
Yeah.
So what was that?
I would say we were always encouraged just to be involved, like find something to do, whether that was at church or school, but just be involved in things. So a lot of like leadership stuff for me at church and things like that kind of led into teaching, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say the same thing as my experiences with our church community and growing up during some hard times where that community really supported us, and seeing firsthand, not just hearing from your parents it's important to give back, but seeing firsthand what that looked like. And so definitely had an influence on me going into social work.
But also just with that whole dynamic, being part of the solution, not just being there because we needed support, but being part of the support for other people too. So.
Yeah.
What do you love about each other?
I mean, for me, they've always been really great role models. I can remember when Becky first started teaching, I loved going into the classroom with her and helping her like cut her laminating and all of that. And then Katie has just always been amazing. She was the one who I called when I was having a hard time at home, and I'd go spend the night at her house. And yeah, they're just great big sisters. I was very, very lucky.
It's funny that you said role model, because you've taken on this role as a stepmom and been like just a really great role model as a mom, and so I love that. And you were that for my kids too, when you would spend your whole summer babysitting for me. And then I mean we
shared a room. I kicked her out.
Yeah.
Kicked her out.
She was born first,
Yeah.
so for all of her character traits that can be attributed to birth order, I will take credit for.
Looking back, the two sisters did not think the oldest would be the governor of Arizona. When she became, obviously you guys were teachers before she became governor, but how did that dynamic change once she did become in such a leadership role?
I don't know that it really changed that much. I mean, she's always been very in touch with it. She taught at a community college before she was governor, and she's been in touch with educators for as long as I can remember. So I don't think it changed really at all.
As soon as because I was in the legislature before I ran for governor, and so the legislature is always trying to inject politics into our classrooms, not in great ways. And so I remember back when I was first running for the legislature, and my races were always in the primary, which you're out there knocking on doors. It's really hot. It was miserable. And so I would get people to drive me so that I could cool off in between. And so her She came with her kids, and they would just like hang out in the van while I got out and knocked on doors. And I remember one time, her son, they called me TT, was like,
They still do.
why is TT doing this? And she's like, I don't know, but we're just going to help her. And then fast forward to 2018 when Red for Ed happened. I think it was even before that. She was in the gallery as a group of AEA when we were voting on the budget, and it was in the middle of the night. It was not transparent. It was being rammed through, and she saw that firsthand. And she had that aha moment of like, oh, this is why, and it made sense. And you told that story, and I just was like, yeah, that's it mattered, yeah.
Well, and I was out of the classroom for a while when my kids were young. So during her early politics days, I also did not understand why would someone work this hard. I didn't understand the impact of local politics because I was out of it. And as soon as I went back into the classroom, it was 2016, and I was like, holy cow. And it mattered so much. So, and I was pretty vocal about like, wow, I was pretty ignorant about this and not supportive because I didn't understand, and now I do. It's really intertwined.
So has it impacted you, I guess, now that she is governor?
Well, I don't feel like I can be very, I don't step into those policy circles because that's not my role. It's definitely more on like the narrative side, the storytelling side. I'm not like an advisor to the governor in an official capacity, so I try to be careful and stay in my lane. But for sure, we're both in districts that have had to close schools recently, and seeing the impacts of the voucher drain on the general fund and how that's impacting funding that goes to our districts that they can, it's really impacting a lot.
I was just going to say, I think hearing from both of them, stories, sometimes really heartbreaking stories about kids that they have in their classroom that are just having horrible experiences, and sometimes coming to school is the only place that they feel safe, that they have an adult they can talk to or that cares about them. And those stories are as important in driving, where we're focused in the governor's office on directing education policy as anything else, because those aren't just kids in a classroom. Those kids are the future of our state, and if we're not meeting them now, we're going to be in a world of hurt generations to come.
What do you think is the number one issue in our state with education? If you could check one thing off that list, you're like, this has to be fixed, number one, what would it be?
The lack of funding at my school is alarming. I currently work 3 days a week because my school can't afford me full-time right now. Teachers at my school buy all their own supplies. We get $50 a year for our supplies, so it's definitely
$50.
$50, yeah. Yeah, and I work in a very low-income area, so the students typically don't come with their own supplies, so $50 does not go very far.
In a recent national survey done by adoptaclassroom.org, 97% of teachers say they spend their own money because their school budgets aren't enough. On average, a teacher will spend $895 of their own money on school supplies.
And I think there's just such a narrow view of what public schools are. It's a place where kids go, they get learning, they go home. And what Governor Hobbs said about just understanding what school represents to kids and understanding the huge support system that we provide to our communities. So when there's bills about putting this law on teachers or making this happen in classrooms or only having funding for this because those aren't real teachers or we don't need money outside of this classroom. There's just a lack of understanding, and which I think is compounded by the lack of funding, which is compounded by the drain of the vouchers.
I think vouchers are a symptom of a bigger issue that we've continued to erode the public's confidence in public schools and the importance of that in building not just students today, but our future. And I've seen the attacks on our public schools firsthand since I got to the legislature in 2011. it's not getting better, and we just keep compounding the funding issues, and ESA is the latest piece of that.
You brought up vouchers a couple of times. Is it the fact that we have the vouchers, or is it the abuse that's in the system with the vouchers? Because we have done extensive reporting on the abuse that is there.
Definitely the abuse. I'm on the board for the Arizona Education Association, so this is something that, in the past we've gone to the voters to ask for more funding, but how do we have more funding when there's not accountability over where that funding is going? So until we can rein in voucher spending, I think other things feel like it's spinning our wheels.
Vouchers refer to the state's Empowerment Scholarship Accounts, or ESAs. It's a program started back in 2011. It had a pretty narrow scope then, meant only for students with disabilities. Those vouchers could be used to pay for their education outside public or charter schools. But over time, Arizona lawmakers have added more and more families who qualified. In 2022, Governor Doug Ducey signed a law that made ESAs, or vouchers, universal, meaning anyone with a child in public school could use public money to send them elsewhere, regardless of how much the family made.
House Bill 2853. Now all Arizona children will have an opportunity at an excellent education. The sky's the limit. The law of the land. Thank you.
About 12,000 families were using vouchers in 2022. A year after that, it ballooned to more than 60,000. Today, that number sits around 100,000 families using vouchers. One problem, though, is what families are using the vouchers for. 12 News has uncovered expansive abuse. Instead of education, families are spending taxpayer dollars on home renovations, kitchen appliances, vacations, jewelry, lingerie, even condoms, just to name a few.
It's just really disheartening every time you see another story on it about what the vouchers have been spent on, and knowing that teachers at my school are just wanting to buy paper and pencils and folders for our kids. And so it's definitely frustrating as a teacher to see the misuse of the vouchers.
So it's not necessarily that the voucher is there, it's the misuse that, do you think, is the main issue?
And the accountability. I mean, where's
Absolutely.
the accountability for how those, do we know those students are achieving? Are they held to the same standards where we have state testing that disrupts our students and our schools for the entire fourth quarter of the school year? And we don't have a choice. We have to be accountable for that. So how do we know that those dollars are being spent on others, the students using the vouchers? Are they held to the same standard? Do they have the same accountability? Are they really getting a better bang for their buck by taking those dollars?
Some of the stats that we pulled in our reporting on these vouchers, like there are 100,000, I think, vouchers. 18,000 families misused those. So there's still a good portion of those families that they haven't misused them. So what would you say to those families that are using those vouchers and they haven't misused them?
Here's what I would add on, in addition to the 18,000 families that are misusing them, there's no income limits. At the end of the day, this is an entitlement program. But what makes it different than any other entitlement program is that there are no restrictions on who can get them. So families in Paradise Valley that were already paying for private school now have this additional government subsidy to go to private school. I talked to families up in Show Low. There's not a lot of private school options in that area, and their sentiment is, we're sending our taxpayer dollars to Phoenix so that families in Paradise Valley can go to private school. We don't have that option. And so it's not equitable in terms of who has access. And when we're if we had unlimited money, sure, everyone could do whatever they wanted, but we don't have that. And we have to prioritize who gets those with some reasonable income caps.
Are you surprised that the legislature hasn't done anything? Because some of the abuse that we have seen is pretty mind-blowing, the things that these families have purchased through these vouchers.
I certainly, having been in the legislature, if I was in the role of defending this program, I would feel embarrassed. And every time every time Craig puts out a new story, I'm like, why aren't they embarrassed now? So they're defending a program that is clearly ripe with abuse. At the same time, calling out fraud and abuse that doesn't exist in other programs.
School closures, you guys touched on that as well. Just a few. Paradise Valley voted to close 3 schools after the 23-24 school year. Scottsdale Unified voted to close 2. Roosevelt needs to close 5. Kyrene plans to close 6 schools in 2027 and 28. So when you're looking, and that's just a few. So when you're looking at that kind of consolidation in schools, how is that impacting education?
So families are disrupted, they're uprooted from their communities, and they have to go assimilate somewhere new. The staffs don't know where they're going to be next year. It's impacted the whole system because it's delayed the ability for us to have contracts for next year, which we would normally have at this point. But they have to place all of the misplaced staff before they can issue contracts to the rest of the school district. So even though 2 schools might seem small in the scheme of what's happening across the valley, but it has really strong impacts on a system. It's disruptive to everything that's happening in the classrooms every day.
Stressful for the families. Yeah. It's stressful for the teachers of the schools that are closing, as well as the teachers that are not sure where they're going next year. Will they have a contract next year? Are they gonna, it's just stressful all around.
I think it's also disruptive to communities. I mean, if you look at, kids being able to walk to school, maybe parents are working, but they have the neighbor kid next door that they can walk home with, so they have an adult. But when you're closing schools and consolidating them, that's not as readily available.
Well, and it limits their choices too, because depending on where the boundaries are determined, it determines busing. So if a family wants this school, but they can only get bused to this school, it impacts their ability to make that choice. If transportation's an issue, which it is for
a huge issue.
For the families that are impacted by the closures in our district.
According to the latest data from the Common Sense Institute, which tracks school closures, in 1 year alone, 8 districts in the valley voted to close 22 schools in 2025, including Cave Creek Unified, Phoenix Elementary, the Isaac School District, Kyrene, and Scottsdale Unified. The reason why they're closing is complex. Part of the reason is families are having fewer children. Then there's a lack of affordable housing, so families stay in their homes longer, which doesn't allow for younger families with children to move into a district. School vouchers also play a role. With state dollars following a child out of the district and into a private school, the district takes a hit. The bottom line, when student counts fall, the state funding tied to each kid also falls. So districts are now being forced to consolidate school buildings and deal with multi-million-dollar budget deficits. How do you balance, and maybe this is for the governor, but this math of keeping a building open and then the emotional hit to a neighborhood? Because we see these families that go before the school boards and they're so emotional, because the school has really been a part of their family and part of their community for, in some cases, decades.
This is really overwhelming and sad. My girls will need to transfer schools multiple times in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think that question really makes the case for having strong school boards and strong leadership at that level, because it's those locally elected school boards who are making those decisions. And the idea of having locally elected school boards is that they're part of the community, and so they have a better understanding of that community than, if we're making those decisions at the administrative level at the governor's office. So I think that, and we've seen, a lot of challenges with school boards as well. And so I think that it's important for people to pay attention to who's on their school board and to be engaged at that level, going and making public comment when there's a decision like that being made, because there is the opportunity to have your voice heard.
You were talking about staffing issues, and maybe Governor, you want to talk to this, but how do you then attract these teachers to come into Arizona and stay in Arizona when the funding isn't there, the pay isn't great? We consistently rank last on education in our state, and now we have schools closing. I mean, it's just like it seems like every month we start talking about another district that's closing schools. And some of these districts, I mean, there's a lot of schools closing down. So then how do you say, you know what, yes, come to Arizona and teach, and stay in Arizona and teach if you already are.
Yeah, so this is why I launched my Educator Retention Task Force. It was one of the first things I did, and we spent a year really doing a deep dive into these issues, talking to educators, former educators, administrators, and not surprisingly, it was kind of three main issues: lack of support, either from educational leaders or the government. They want more pay, and it's not just pay; it's benefits, and then just the attacks from the government. So not just lack of support, but all these unfunded mandates that are being put on them in terms of how they can teach. I've been able to address some of that with being the backstop, as being able to veto education policy that continues to attack teachers, but we need more funding, and that's been a challenge in the current legislative climate. So we're right now talking about renewing Prop 123, and that's a huge priority to ensure that we're keeping those additional dollars in our classrooms.
The Arizona Department of Education's first retention report found well over 8,000 teachers walked away from Arizona classrooms in a single year. The majority of those said they needed more money. Of those surveyed, 77% said they felt burned out, 75% said they didn't feel respected, and close to 63% said they needed or wanted a higher salary. The average starting salary for a new teacher sits around $46,000 a year, about $10,000 less than the state's cost of living. What would you say to the young people who would be watching this, that maybe they're on the fence about getting into education, when there's all these challenges that we are facing here in Arizona, and you want to recruit them? So what would you say to them?
Oh, that's hard. I would say, nobody gets into education for the glamour of it. You do it for the kids. I would say, the kids are always going to be there. The education as a whole kind of changes all the time. It's a swinging pendulum. So I wouldn't dissuade anybody from getting into education. It's very fulfilling. I love what I do every day. I get to make a difference, and that is important to me, and that doesn't change no matter what the policy is.
They're giving me a wrap. We've got to wrap up the interview. But I wanted to ask, though, before we do, being the sisters of the governor, has that kind of given you power to speak up, or is that kind of pressure to stay quiet?
Oh, that is, I would say both in a lot of ways. It
depends on the situation.
I've never called you in to take down that social media post. No. I might have done that to my kids, but
I don't post. No.
True. Yeah. No, I don't think there's, I mean, I don't think I've ever felt specific pressure to not say or do anything. I think just as teachers by nature, we're used to advocating for our kids and for our schools and for what we need. So I don't think Katie being governor has changed anything for me.
Do you call her and just be like, you got to fix this? Like, what happened? Like,
well, no, because I know it's not. If she could, she would. It's not just her, though. It's the whole system that has to be part of that. But definitely vent to her for sure.
Just about life.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We're always cheering on that veto pen for sure. Or it's a stamp, right? It's a stamp.
Yeah. For the last question you asked, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but what I was thinking was, I don't think there's anyone in this room who, if you said, who's a teacher that inspired you, every single person has one. And you don't know if you're that teacher for someone, but it's I see it as, for that kid who was inspired by that teacher, that makes all the difference in terms of what they go on to do. And so teachers, it's not just about the work in front of you in the classroom every day, but teachers really are shaping our future. I mean, for third graders who, I don't know what third graders do in the classroom every day, but if they're not reading by then, they're in trouble for the rest of their whole school career.
Right.
They're going to be behind. It's going to affect their chance of graduating, and then what they do post graduation. And so to me, it's so much more than just what happens every day in the classroom, but what that means for the future of our state.